The silence does not arrive like a gentle guest. It crashes in like an incoming tide, cold and absolute. Imagine, for a moment, that the stage of your existence is suddenly stripped of its props. The golden lights dim to a flicker and then die. The applause you have come to rely upon for your sense of self, that phantom feedback loop of career titles, bank balances, and the nodding approval of acquaintances, is abruptly silenced. The phone, once a pulsing lifeline of supposed significance, lies inert, a black mirror reflecting only the dim outline of a face that suddenly feels like a stranger's. This is the 0 point. It is the visceral, skin-prickling reality of the blank slate. Most souls, when standing at this precipice, tremble. They look to the left, scanning the horizon for a savior. They look to the right, searching for a logical exit, a ladder, or a lifeline. There is a palpable terror in the stillness, for it reveals the most dangerous secret the modern world works tirelessly to mask, that you have been building your house upon the shifting sands of external validation. But consider the paradox. This, the moment of your perceived annihilation, is the only moment you are truly terrifyingly free. The world has slammed its doors, but in doing so, it has stopped the frantic noise that prevents you from hearing the heartbeat of your own sovereign spirit. You stand in the center of a hollow room, yet the room is not empty. It is merely waiting. The question that hangs in the heavy air is not, how will I survive, but rather, who are you when the world no longer tells you who you are? This is the pattern interruption, the shattering of the mirror, so that you might finally see the source of the reflection. To survive the 0 point, one must undergo a rigorous deconstruction of the ego's dependency on form. We must ask, why does the soul recoil at the loss of assets, position, and acclaim? The answer lies in the deeply ingrained, false doctrine that security is a product of external circumstance. We have been conditioned to believe that we are effects of the marketplace, the economy, and the perceptions of others. We operate under the delusion that we are the result of life, rather than its cause. How do we break this? Through the recursive process of spiritual audit. First, we must dismantle the lie of the external provider. We often think that our safety resides in the ledger of a bank. Yet, if that bank were to crumble, does the life force within you cease to beat? Of course not. Therefore, the source is not the ledger. The source is the consciousness that conceived of the ledger in the first place. We must understand that money is merely a symbol of energy, a secondary manifestation of an internal, invisible reality. When one loses the money, they have lost the symbol, not the capacity to generate. Second, we must question the nature of the Savior. The human impulse is to outsource power to pray to gods, to wait for benefactors, or to hope for policy shifts. This is a subtle form of spiritual abdication. Why do we do this? Because to claim sovereignty is to claim the responsibility that accompanies it. If you are the master of your reality, you can no longer blame the bad economy for your stagnation. This is a frightening prospect for the ego, which prefers the safety of being a victim over the responsibility of being a creator. The mechanism is clear. Your spirit is the primary substance. The world is the shadow. You have been attempting to rearrange the shadows to change the light, but the light is you. The deconstruction concludes with this realization. You are not a creature of the world. You are the architect of your own experience. The void is not a state of lack. It is a state of potentiality, a canvas waiting for the stroke of a definitive decree. In a distant province, there lived a master architect named Eloin. She was renowned for constructing cathedrals that defied the gravity of the earth's spires that seemed to kiss the heavens. Her work was so precise that kings traveled from afar just to walk the halls of her design. One night, a great fire consumed her atelier. All her physical blueprints, her measurements, the gold leaf models of her upcoming monuments, and the coin she had set aside for materials were reduced to gray ash. The next morning, the village gathered to watch, expecting to see a woman broken by ruin. They found her instead standing in the center of the blackened ruins, her hands folded, her eyes clear and unblinking. A merchant, sensing an opportunity to pity her, approached and asked, "Eloin, your life's work is gone. How will you ever begin again without your plans, your gold, or your reputation?" Eloin did not turn to him. She kept her gaze fixed on the empty space where her greatest spire was to stand. She said, "You see ash, merchant. I see the foundation. My blueprints were never on paper. They were etched into my mind. My wealth was never the coin in the vault. It was the vision that allowed me to command the stone to rise. The fire has only cleared the space for a structure far grander than the one it destroyed. I am not starting over. I am starting from a position of higher authority." She did not wait for a loan. She did not beg for labor. She began to walk the site, speaking into the quiet morning, describing the dimensions of the new hall with such profound certainty that those who overheard her felt their own spirits stir. Within days, the stonecutters appeared, drawn not by an advertisement, but by the gravitational pull of her unwavering declaration. The monument she built was twice the size of the first, for it was built with the clarity of one who had mastered the void. She proved that the master of the craft does not fear the loss of the tools, for the master is the tool. To embody this truth today, you must conduct your own ritual of the void. Find a moment of absolute silence. Remove the distractions of the digital world. Silence the phone. Close the screens, and sit with the reality of your current standing. Acknowledge your fear, but do not entertain it. Instead, look at your life as if you were an external observer. Ask yourself, if I were to lose all that I currently possess, what would remain? The answer is your voice. It is the only thing you truly own. It is the bridge between the unseen realm and the material world. To integrate this, begin to practice commanding the silence. Do not speak in hopes of being heard. Speak in order to define. When you walk into your day, do not observe the lack of opportunity. Look into the empty space and declare the nature of your future as if it were already present. You have reclaimed your internal authority. You now understand that the void is not your enemy, it is your workshop. But now, we must address the fertile soil upon which you are about to plant these new seeds. For even the most powerful decree will wither if the soil of your subconscious mind is choked with the weeds of old, limiting beliefs. We have stood in the void. Now, we must learn the divine mechanism of the law that governs the growth of your new reality. The vault is open, but are you prepared to govern what lies within? In our next chapter, we descend into the hidden mechanics of your own mind. Imagine a vast, sprawling garden at the hour of twilight. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine. There is a profound stillness here, a quality of waiting that permeates the soil. Beneath the surface, in the secret, subterranean corridors of the earth, life is constantly recalibrating. It does not pause to ask if the sun will rise. It does not panic if the rain is delayed. It simply responds to the seeds already embedded within its dark, nutrient-rich silence. Now, consider the paradox of the human soul. We are the gardeners of our own reality, yet most of us spend our days frantic and loud, pacing the surface of our lives, cursing the weeds, and wondering why the harvest is meager. We wring our hands at the dry patches of our bank accounts, the barren seasons of our relationships, and the encroaching shadows of our insecurities. We shout at the sky, demanding change, while remaining entirely oblivious to the fact that we, with our most persistent, most intimate, and most repetitive thoughts, have been sowing the very seeds that produce this current landscape. The world we see is the garden we have grown, whether by conscious design or by careless drift. This is not a judgment, but a revelation. The ground beneath your feet is not neutral. It is a highly responsive, fertile medium of expression. It is governed by a law, as immutable as gravity, a mechanism that does not know how to refuse, only how to manifest. The atmosphere is currently humming with the frequency of your inner world, waiting for you to stop the noise and realize the power of the soil you are tending. The core principle at play here is the law of belief, the divine engine that bridges the metaphysical and the material. To understand its operation, one must venture into the architecture of the subconscious mind, that vast, silent reservoir that serves as the foundation of your external existence. Why does the subconscious mind act with such absolute, blind obedience? The subconscious is a faithful and impersonal servant. It operates on the principle of acceptance. It lacks the capacity for skepticism, judgment, or discernment between what is real and what is merely imagined. It is a mirror of infinite depth. If you impress upon this soil a feeling of lack, it cannot do anything but sprout the brambles of scarcity. If you impress upon it a feeling of prosperity, it is biologically, spiritually, and cosmically compelled to arrange the circumstances that will bring that prosperity into form. How does this mechanism function? Through the alchemy of consistent emotional conviction. It is not enough to hold a fleeting, whimsical hope for improvement. The subconscious is unmoved by shallow, momentary desires. It responds to the deep, resonant tones of what you hold to be true in the quiet, unmonitored moments of your being. Recursive analysis forces us to confront a difficult question. Why do we continue to broadcast signals of lack if we desire abundance? We do so because of identity anchoring. Our subconscious mind is anchored to the history of our experiences. If you have known struggle, your subconscious recognizes struggle as your natural state. When you attempt to affirm abundance, the subconscious looks at the evidence of your life, the empty desk, the overdue bill, and concludes that your affirmation is a lie. It then prioritizes the evidence of your past over the hope of your future. To overcome this, one must move beyond the level of intellectual affirmation and into visceral impression. You must trick the soil. You must engage the senses in the reality of your desire until the subconscious accepts the new image as the current truth. The mechanism of creation is a feedback loop. You imagine, you feel, you impress, and the world, being the echo of your interior, must reorganize itself to match your new broadcast. It does not argue. It simply complies. In the valley of Oakhaven, there lived a man named Silas, who was known throughout the land for his miserable harvests. While his neighbors enjoyed fields of golden wheat and orchards heavy with fruit, Silas's plot was a chaotic mess of thistles and stunted, bitter stalks. He spent his days in the village tavern, complaining to anyone who would listen about the poor quality of the soil, the cruelty of the sun, and the unfairness of the rain. "The earth is cursed," he would declare, "and I am destined to toil for nothing." One year, a stranger visited the village, a woman of great age and quiet eyes. She watched Silas as he cursed the dry earth and walked away with a heavy, defeated spirit. The next morning, she walked into Silas's field and dug into the soil with her bare hands. She did not find the soil cursed. She found it rich, deep, and remarkably fertile. She realized that Silas had been throwing his seeds, seeds of complaint, seeds of doubt, seeds of "I can't" into the ground every single day, and then watering them with his tears of frustration. The woman planted a single row of heirloom grain and instructed the earth, "You are alive with the potential of abundance. Receive this seed and manifest the harvest that corresponds to the greatness within you." She did not beg. She declared. Within weeks, the green shoots were taller than any in the valley. Silas returned to find the stranger standing before a field of lush, bowing wheat. He was stunned. "How?" he asked. "My soil was dead for years." The woman looked at him and said, "The soil was never dead, Silas. It was only obedient. It grew exactly what you planted. You planted complaints, and so you harvested a life of struggle. I planted a vision of harvest, and so the earth provided. The ground does not choose, it only obeys the hand that scatters the seed. Silas looked down at his own hands, realizing for the first time that his misery had been an act of his own making, and that his wealth or his ruin was entirely in the palm of his own hand. To integrate this truth, you must become the conscious sower of your own atmosphere. Today, perform the audit of the sower. For 1 hour, observe your internal monologue. Do not try to change it yet. Simply witness what you are planting. Are your thoughts robust, healthy seeds of expectation, or are they withered, frantic seeds of anxiety? Once you have identified the weeds of your habitual thought, use the law of displacement. You cannot simply pull out a weed and leave the space empty, or another will take its place. You must plant something immediately. If you catch yourself thinking, "I am worried about my debt," displace it instantly with a firm, calm declaration. Divine intelligence directs my affairs, and my supply is constant. Feel the weight of those words. Do not let them be mere sounds. Feel them in your chest, in your breath. You have begun to master the soil. But even the best seed, once planted, requires protection from the birds of the air, those persistent, whispering voices of the world that seek to peck away at your faith. Now that you understand the divine mechanism, we must prepare you to wield the one tool that can ensure your garden flourishes regardless of the weather. The tool that is always in your possession. The instrument of creation that has been resting in your mouth since the dawn of your days. We move now to the power of the wand. Prepare to speak your world into form. Consider the human mouth. It is a deceptively simple aperture, a soft gateway of flesh and bone, framed by the breath that sustains the heartbeat. Yet, within this modest chamber lies a power that has ignited revolutions, toppled empires, and birthed civilizations from the dust of mere thought. There is a profound, almost terrifying paradox here. The same vessel that whispers defeat into the pillow at night, lamenting the weight of the world, is the same instrument designed to command the very elements to rearrange themselves. Observe the crowd in the marketplace of life. They walk with heads bowed, their mouths heavy with the lexicon of limitation. They speak of struggle, of hardship, of trying to get by. Each word is a puff of smoke, yet cumulatively, they form a suffocating smog that clouds their own vision. They treat their speech as a frivolous byproduct of thought, a mere mechanism for communication, failing to recognize that they are not communicating, they are conjuring. Every syllable uttered is a drop of ink in the ledger of existence. You are never silent. Even in your quietude, your inner dialogue is a constant, rhythmic incantation. The paradox is this: you are walking around with a scepter of infinite creative potential hidden behind your teeth, yet you use it only to describe the cage you believe you inhabit. The air in the room ripples with the frequency of your voice, but are you aware that it is the blueprint of your tomorrow? To master the principle of the word is the wand. One must first confront the metaphysical architecture of language. Why does the word possess such generative force? We must look to the ancient, ontological truth that the universe is not made of matter, but of vibration. Everything that appears solid, the stone, the coin, the obstacle, is merely a slowing of frequency into a shape that the senses can perceive. The word is the precise frequency that directs that substance. Why do we fail to see the results of our speech? It is because we fall into the trap of descriptive inertia. Most people describe their reality. They look at a bank statement, see a deficit, and say, "I am broke." In that moment, they are reinforcing the shadow, confirming the appearance as the absolute truth. They are using their wand to carve the current state of lack into the marble of their future. To use the wand correctly, one must practice definitive creation. You must ignore the evidence of the senses and speak the truth that you desire to exist before it has manifested in the physical plane. How does this work? It operates through the resonance of decree. When you speak a word with unwavering conviction, you are not merely making a sound, you are emitting a command. You are aligning your personal vibration with the underlying fabric of divine intelligence. This is the bridge between the unseen realm of infinite potential and the material realm of form. The recursive question is, if the word is the wand, why are we afraid to use it? We fear the responsibility. If we accept that our words shape our world, we can no longer afford the luxury of a bad mood or a complaint. We realize that every grumble is an act of self-sabotage, a misaligned spell that clutters our own path. To speak with a wand is to accept that you are the sole author of your affairs. It requires a shedding of the victim identity, for the victim is a slave to circumstance, while the wielder of the word is the master of it. You are not meant to wait for doors to open, you are meant to speak the doors into existence. In the chronicles of the Old Realm, there existed a monarch known as King Alaric the Silent. His kingdom was besieged by a drought so severe that the riverbeds cracked like broken pottery and the crops turned to yellowed lace. The Council of Advisors screamed for aid, pleading with neighboring nations for grain, begging for rainmakers, and scrambling to draft treaties of desperation. They paced the halls, shouting their fears, their voices a cacophony of panic that served only to thicken the despair. Alaric, however, did not participate in the clamor. He locked himself in the high chamber, a room of absolute stone, and refused to speak a single word of the drought. For 40 days, he remained in the silence, listening only to the frequency of the life he desired to see. He did not look at the withered fields. He looked at his own soul, which remained lush and overflowing. On the 41st day, he stepped onto the balcony before his terrified subjects. The people prepared for a speech of surrender, expecting the king to announce the evacuation of the capital. Instead, Alaric stood with his chin lifted, his eyes fixed on the horizon, and he spoke. He did not ask for rain. He did not petition the sky. He spoke as one who held the keys to the celestial gates. He decreed, "The currents of abundance flow through these lands. The earth remembers its promise. The rain is already here." His voice was not loud, yet it held a weight that seemed to vibrate the very air. It was not a request. It was a reality he was imposing upon the silence. Even as the sky remained a mocking, cloudless blue, the king walked among the people, thanking them for the harvest, speaking of the bounty as if he were already wading through waist-high wheat. He ignored the dry earth beneath his sandals. He refused to acknowledge the lie of the drought. By the evening of the second day, a strange coolness descended. By midnight, the air was thick with the scent of ozone. When the clouds finally tore open, they did not just bring rain. They brought a deluge that turned the cracked earth into the most fertile soil the kingdom had ever known. The king did not cheer, he simply nodded. He knew that the rain had not come from the clouds, it had come from the decree. He had used his voice to bend the atmospheric vibration, proving that when the word is aligned with the source, the material world has no choice but to follow. To integrate this power, you must practice the daily decree. Begin today by identifying the one area of your life where you have been the most descriptive of your lack. Perhaps it is your finances, your health, or your sense of purpose. Instead of speaking of what is, begin to speak of what is becoming as if it already is. If your bank account is low, stop saying, "I can't afford this." Replace it with the wand of your voice. "Divine supply is flowing to me, and I am a master steward of abundance." Do not whisper this in a corner. Speak it with the authority of a ruler issuing a mandate. Do this 3 times a day, with a spine as straight as a spear and a voice that does not tremble. You are recalibrating your reality. You are training the environment to recognize your authority. You have taken the first steps toward becoming the architect of your atmosphere. But there is a silent enemy that lurks in the shadows of your history, a collection of whispers, memories, and past defeats that seek to argue against your new decrees. Even as you begin to speak with power, the bankruptcy of belief will try to assert itself, attempting to convince you that your words are merely hollow sounds. We must now prepare to face this internal opposition, to audit the bank of your soul, and to ensure that the debt of the past is fully cleared. You have begun to speak. Now, you must learn to stand in the face of the silence. It is 3:00 a.m. The hour of the wolf, when the world is stripped of its superficial gaiety, and the mind is left to wander the desolate corridors of its own history. The house is silent, yet for the one struggling with the architecture of belief, the room is deafeningly loud. This is the hour when the mask slips. The ledger of life, that ledger you have been keeping in the quiet, shadowed chambers of your subconscious, is pulled from its shelf. It is a heavy, dusty volume, filled with the ink of every unpaid bill, every failed ambition, and every whispered, "I am not enough." You lie there, the darkness pressing against your eyelids like a physical weight, and you feel the phantom hands of the past grasping at your potential. The paradox is stark. You possess the capacity to command the universe, to speak worlds into being, yet you feel entirely insolvent. You feel like a beggar, clutching at the hem of a reality you do not feel entitled to inhabit. The phone sits silent on the bedside table, a black monolith of indifference. In this moment, the illusion of your poverty reaches its zenith. It is not that the money is missing, it is that the belief is bankrupt. You have spent your inner currency, your faith, your attention, and your emotional resonance on the market of fear, and now you face the deficit. The emptiness you feel is not a lack of resources. It is the haunting sensation of a soul that has forgotten it owns the bank. To transcend this state of spiritual insolvency, we must subject the bankruptcy of belief to a ruthless deconstruction. Why do we cling to this sense of lack with such tenacity? The answer is found in the psychological construct of sunk cost loyalty. We have invested years, perhaps decades, in the narrative of our own hardship. We have identified so deeply with the struggle, with the striving, the hustle, and the fear that we mistake this struggle for our very soul. We are loyal to our own misery because it is the only thing we have truly mastered. How do we break the hold of this internalized poverty? By recursively questioning the origin of our perceived truth. When you say, "I cannot afford this," you are not stating a financial fact. You are making a theological statement. You are declaring that your supply is dependent on an external, finite source, the economy, your employer, the system, and that this source is currently depleted. But how can the divine be depleted? If you are a reflection of an infinite source, then lack is not a condition. It is a delusion. The bankruptcy of belief occurs because we have sanctified delay. We look at our empty accounts and say, "It is not the right time." We frame our paralysis as patience and our fear as wisdom. We wait for a sign from the world, a promotion, a check, a miracle, before we allow ourselves to feel the frequency of abundance. But the divine does not operate on human escrow. To believe that you must wait is to believe that you are separated from your good by time. In truth, the supply is already here, fully formed in the unseen realm, waiting only for your consciousness to clear the debris of doubt. Why are we so committed to this state of waiting? Because waiting is safe. Waiting absolves us of the risk of command. If we are waiting, we are not failing. But to stop waiting is to commit to the act of creation, and that requires a total surrender of the old, weary image of the struggling self. We must bankrupt the believer in lack so that the investor in divinity can emerge. In the bustling city of Caliph, there lived a merchant named Hadrian. He was infamous for his obsession with his own destitution. Despite owning a warehouse that spanned 3 city blocks, he lived in the smallest, dampest corner of his office, shivering under a thin blanket, terrified that he would wake up to find his coffers empty. He spent every waking hour counting his coins, sighing at the slightest fluctuation in market prices, and rehearsing the story of his impending doom to anyone who would listen. One day, a master of the ancient ways walked into Hadrian's office. The master looked at the shivering merchant and asked, "Why do you live in the cold, Hadrian, when you own the key to the most opulent vault in the kingdom?" Hadrian scoffed. "My vault is a myth. I have checked every wall, every floorboard. I am poor, and I am cursed." The master walked to the wall behind Hadrian's desk and placed his hand upon a seam in the stone that looked like a mere crack. With a gentle push, a massive slab rotated to reveal a cavernous chamber filled to the ceiling with gold, silk, jewels, and scrolls of infinite value. The light from the chamber blinded the merchant. He had lived in the dark of his own office for 40 years, with the solution sitting directly behind him. "The vault was always here," the master said, "but you could not see it because your eyes were fixed on the floor, counting the dust, and your mouth was busy reciting the liturgy of your own bankruptcy. You were not poor, Hadrian. You were simply hypnotized. Your belief in your own poverty was the only lock on that door." Hadrian realized then that he had not been waiting for money. He had been waiting for the courage to look at what was already his. He had been a beggar in a palace, convinced he was a pauper in the street. To embody this today, you must perform the renunciation of debt. Take a sheet of paper and write down the top 3 fears that fuel your feeling of lack. Write them clearly. Then take the paper and metaphorically or literally burn it. As the paper turns to ash, speak this decree aloud. "I hereby cancel the contract of limitation. My history is not my master. My supply is not my debt. I am, and have always been, the heir to the infinite." Do not look at your current bank statement after this. Look at your spirit. Cultivate the feeling of wealth in your body, the sensation of ease, the breath of gratitude, the posture of a sovereign. Carry this feeling into every room you enter. You are not a seeker of supply. You are the source of it. If you are ready to stop identifying with your past deficits and are prepared to open the vault of your own potential, hit the like button. Subscribe to the journey, for we are moving into the most profound work yet. You have begun to see through the illusion of your own bankruptcy. You realize that the vault is not empty. It is merely waiting for the right vibration to unlock it. But there is a final, lingering shadow, the residue of old, discordant thoughts that argue against your new identity. Even now, the mind whispers, "What if?" We must now learn how to perform the surgical removal of these internal echoes. We move into the law that ensures no 2 opposing truths can reside in the same consciousness at the same time. The law of substitution is calling. Are you prepared to dissolve the last vestiges of your old, limiting life? There is a sound that lives in the marrow of every seeker, a persistent, low-frequency hum of static. It is not the noise of the external world, with its frantic sirens and digital chatter. It is the internal clamor of the lying chorus. Imagine walking into an ancient, dimly lit library, where the shelves are packed with scrolls of your own past. The echoes of a parent's warning, the stinging memory of a failed venture, the shame of a word left unsaid, and the cold logic of an economy that claims there is never enough. This library is your mind, and the static you hear is the sound of these scrolls being read simultaneously, a cacophony of contradictory truths. You sit in the center of this room, trying to read a new script, a decree of abundance, a declaration of your own divinity, but the old voices clamor to be heard. They are the parasites of the subconscious, and they hold a paradox that keeps the soul in chains. They are entirely made of your own memory, yet they possess an autonomy that feels like an external tyrant. You wish to be free, yet you carry the cage with you. You wish for the light of expansion, but your inner landscape is cluttered with the rotting heirlooms of yesterday's defeats. The challenge is not merely to be positive. It is to realize that you are currently hosting a ghost choir that is singing a song of scarcity, and as long as they sing, the new music of your soul cannot find the space to resonate. There is a sound that lives in the marrow of every seeker, a persistent, low-frequency hum of static. It is not the noise of the external world, with its frantic sirens and digital chatter. It is the internal clamor of the lying chorus. Imagine walking into an ancient, dimly lit library, where the shelves are packed with scrolls of your own past, the echoes of a parent's warning, the stinging memory of a failed venture, the shame of a word left unsaid, and the cold logic of an economy that claims there is never enough. This library is your mind, and the static you hear is the sound of these scrolls being read simultaneously, a cacophony of contradictory truths. You sit in the center of this room, trying to read a new script, a decree of abundance, a declaration of your own divinity, but the old voices clamor to be heard. They are the parasites of the subconscious, and they hold a paradox that keeps the soul in chains. They are entirely made of your own memory, yet they possess an autonomy that feels like an external tyrant. You wish to be free, yet you carry the cage with you. You wish for the light of expansion, but your inner landscape is cluttered with the rotting heirlooms of yesterday's defeats. The challenge is not merely to be positive. It is to realize that you are currently hosting a ghost choir that is singing a song of scarcity, and as long as they sing, the new music of your soul cannot find the space to resonate. To silence this chorus, one must invoke the law of substitution. This is not merely a spiritual suggestion, it is a rigid, unforgiving principle of the subconscious. We must ask, why does the mind cling to these discordant patterns? The mind is essentially a vacuum-averse instrument. It seeks to fill every available space with something. If that space is occupied by the conviction of limitation, it cannot, by the very laws of psychic physics, hold the conviction of expansion. How does the process of substitution actually function? It works through the non-concurrent occupancy rule. You cannot hold two opposing vibrations as your primary reality at the same time. The subconscious mind is like a vessel. It can be filled with salt water or fresh water, but it cannot be both. When we attempt to affirm abundance while still harboring the fear of lack, we create a psychic dissonance that manifests as stagnation. We are literally canceling our own spells. Why is this so difficult? It is because we have treated our limiting beliefs as harmless heirlooms. We view our past failures as part of our identity. We ask, how can I just let go of my past? But this is the wrong question. The recursive question is, how can I afford to keep it? If your past failures are the mold for your future reality, then keeping them is an act of self-destruction. Substitution is the act of sacred replacement. It is not about fighting the thoughts. Fighting only gives them energy. It is about superseding them. It is the tactical decision to displace the lie with the truth, with such frequency and such conviction that the subconscious finally stops recognizing the lie as a valid currency. You do not clean the library by yelling at the books. You clean it by burning the false ones and filling the shelves with the truth. You must be the uncompromising librarian of your own soul. You must choose, with cold, sovereign authority, what is allowed to take up residence in the temple of your consciousness. In the high mountains of the east, there was a weaver named Ishani. Her tapestries were famous for their intricate patterns, yet in the center of every piece, there was a recurring knot, a tangled mess of thread that marred the beauty of the entire design. People would buy her work, but they would always point to the knot, asking why she, the master weaver, could not undo it. Ishani spent years trying to pick at the knot. She used needles, she used oils to soften the fibers, she even prayed over the threads, but the knot remained, growing tighter with every attempt to unravel it. She was obsessed with the knot. It had become the focus of her life. She became known as the weaver of the knot, and her reputation began to fade as her frustration grew. One day, a master traveler stopped at her loom. He watched her struggle for an hour, and then said, "Ishani, why do you waste your life trying to fix what is already destroyed?" "I must fix it," she wept. It is part of the tapestry. The master took a pair of golden shears from his belt and, with a swift, decisive movement, he cut the thread completely. The tangle fell to the floor, leaving an empty space in the fabric. Ishani gasped in horror. "You have ruined it." "No," the master said calmly. "I have given you the space to weave the pattern you actually desire. Stop trying to mend the old mistakes. You cannot turn a knot into a flower. You can only cut the knot away and weave a flower in the empty space." Ishani picked up a new, vibrant thread of gold. She realized that she had been trapped by her own insistence on repairing her history. She began to weave a new design, and where the knot had been, she wove a brilliant, shining sun. The tapestry became her masterpiece. She learned that the power of the weaver was not just in the creation, but in the courage to cut away the error and substitute it with the truth. To embody this truth today, you must perform the culling of the chorus. Take a moment to list the 3 most persistent negative mantras that play in the back of your mind, the whispers that say you are not ready or that resources are finite. Then, for every negative mantra, craft a counter-decree. If the mantra is, "I am not enough," your substitution must be, "I am the vessel through which infinite power expresses itself." This is your new daily bread. You must carry these counter-decrees with you like a blade. Every time the old thought attempts to surface, do not engage it. Do not analyze it. Do not feel guilty for having it. Simply look it in the eye and say, "You have no home here anymore." And then immediately replace it with your new, vibrant thread of truth. Do this until the static stops. Do this until the new music becomes the only song you hear. You have learned to clear the space. You have learned to replace the lie. But there is a final, insidiously subtle illusion that keeps the soul trapped in the waiting room of destiny. The concept of divine timing. The world has taught you to treat your stagnation as a holy wait, a period of spiritual development. We are going to destroy that myth. You are about to discover that your wait is not a command from above. It is a signal of your own hesitation. The bridge to the next chapter is built on the realization that your good is not coming, it is already here, rushing to meet you the moment you stop pushing it away with the language of delay. Are you prepared to stop waiting? There is a clock that ticks in the center of the human psyche, a rhythmic metronome set to the pace of the world. It is the grandfather clock of tradition, the hourglass of expectation, and the digital hum of the marketplace, all singing a dissonant chorus of not yet. You look at the calendar and see months of waiting. You look at the mirror and see years of aging. You look at your bank account and see the agonizingly slow accumulation of a life built through mere labor. This is the perception of time, as a linear, external master, a cage with bars made of hours and minutes. But consider the paradox. The divine does not possess a watch. The source of all life exists in the eternal. Now, an oceanic expanse where every outcome already exists in a state of completion. When you pray, when you decree, when you hunger for a breakthrough, you are reaching for something that you believe is in the future. Yet, the moment you define your good as something that is coming to you, you have effectively pushed it into the horizon, ensuring that as you walk toward it, it moves exactly as far away as you are. The frustration you feel is not the resistance of the universe. It is the friction of your own consciousness trying to synchronize 2 different clocks. You are living in a mirage of divine timing that you have constructed to excuse your own hesitation. The air is still, yet you feel as though you are running a race that has no finish line. The question is not, when will my time come? The question is, why are you keeping your life waiting in the hallway of your own doubt? To dissolve the mirage of time, we must perform a surgical dissection of the concept of waiting. Why has the seeker been taught to view patience as a virtue? We have conflated stagnation with surrender. We have been told that we must endure the waiting room to prove our worthiness. We ask, if I am ready, why is the manifestation not here? The recursive answer is, because you are not actually ready. You are waiting to be ready. How does the mind use delay as a protective mechanism? It is an act of self-preservation. If you believe your good is arriving in the future, you never have to face the terror of the present. You never have to step into the fullness of your power today. You can remain a seeker, a student, or an aspirant. These identities are safe. They require no demonstration. To believe in divine timing is to outsource your agency to a cosmic schedule that is, in reality, a projection of your own subconscious resistance. How does the law of time actually operate? It is governed by the synchronization of essence. The universe does not respond to your wishes. It responds to your state. If your state is I am waiting, the universe provides the environment of the waiting room. If your state is I am in possession, the universe must arrange the circumstances of the manifestation. Time, in the material world, is a variable of depth, not duration. What once took years to manifest can collapse into a matter of days or even moments when the internal contradiction is removed. Why do we cling to the illusion of it is not the right time? It is because the right time is always now, and now is the only place where you are fully responsible for the result. To collapse time is to accept that there is no gap between your command and its effect. The lag you experience in your life is not a delay in the heavens. It is the time it takes for your subconscious to convince your conscious mind that what you are declaring is actually true. If you can shorten that internal conversation, you collapse the timeline of your life. You do not wait for the future. You arrive at the truth of your being, and the future has no choice but to meet you there. In the high mountains, there was a man named Calin who spent his life studying the great river. He believed that to cross the river, one had to wait for the seasonal ebb time when the waters would naturally grow shallow. For generations, his people waited for the divine ebb, singing songs of patience and watching the bank with longing eyes. They lived their entire lives on the near shore, looking across at the fertile plains of the other side, believing that the river was a gatekeeper that decided when they were ready to cross. Calin, however, grew weary of the waiting. He watched the water not with longing, but with observation. He realized that the river was not a barrier, but a flow. He saw that the current was only dangerous to those who resisted it, and that the depth was only a problem for those who tried to walk the bottom. He built a small, light raft from the reeds of the bank and stood at the edge of the water. "You cannot cross," the elder shouted. "It is not the season. You must wait for the ebb." Calin did not listen. He stepped onto the raft and pushed off. He did not fight the current, he aligned with it. He realized that the river existed in a state of constant motion, and that by stepping in, he became part of that motion. He reached the other side in mere minutes, while his people continued to wait for a season that had nothing to do with their movement. Calin proved that the divine ebb was not an external event, it was the moment of decision. The river did not change its depth for him. He changed his relationship to the river. He understood that those who wait for the world to move are slaves to the clock, while those who move with the truth are the masters of the flow. To embody this today, you must perform the collapse of the calendar. For the next 24 hours, stop using the language of later. When you think of your goals, do not frame them as things you are working toward, frame them as things you are currently inhabiting. Instead of saying, "I will have wealth," say, "Wealth is my current state of being." Feel the anxiety that arises when you stop the waiting routine. That anxiety is the ghost of your old self, afraid to be present. Invite it to leave. Replace it with the mantra, "What is mine by divine right cannot be late. It rushes to me now under grace." Say this until the urgency vanishes and is replaced by a calm, unshakable expectancy. You are not running to catch your future. You are standing still, and your future is arriving to catch you. You have learned to dismantle the clock, you realize that your good is not at the mercy of a calendar, but there is one final, critical distinction to make: the difference between asking and ordering. You have spent your life asking for bread, but you are the master of the house. In the next chapter, we descend into the law of command. You are not a petitioner of the heavens. You are the voice of the divine authority on earth. Are you prepared to stop negotiating and start ruling? Picture a grand, vaulted hall, ancient and silent. The air is heavy with the scent of ozone and old parchment. At the far end stands a throne, empty, yet pulsating with a quiet, expectant energy. You walk into this hall, your footsteps echoing against the marble, feeling small beneath the vast, gilded ceiling. For years, you have stood at the threshold of this room, hat in hand, head bowed, whispering prayers into the rafters, hoping that some unseen administrator of the universe might hear your plea and grant you a fraction of what you desire. You have treated your own life as a series of negotiations with an elusive, distant authority. But now, look closer at the throne. It is not empty because the ruler is absent. It is empty because you have been standing in the doorway, refusing to sit. The paradox of the human experience is this: we act as if we are supplicants of our own supply, yet we hold the scepter of authority in our own hands. We plead for the things that we were designed to command. We use our voice to ask, to bargain, to rationalize, and to apologize, when the law of the universe is designed to respond only to the firmness of a decree. The silence you hear is not indifference. It is the universe holding its breath, waiting for you to realize that you are not here to petition the law. You are here to be the law. To master the law of command, we must undergo a radical shift in our internal posture. We must ask, why have we been conditioned to believe that asking is the most virtuous form of spiritual engagement? It is because asking is the language of the ego. It is safe, it is humble, and most importantly, it requires no outcome. If you ask, you can be told no, and you can accept that no as the will of a higher power. It absolves you of the need to achieve. How does the law of command differ? It is based on the absolute premise that substance is obedient. The world is not a chaotic, indifferent mechanism. It is a responsive, malleable field of energy that organizes itself around the frequency of conviction. When you shift from asking to ordering, you are not being arrogant. You are being aligned. You are recognizing that the same divine intelligence that animates the stars also animates your voice. Why is it so difficult to speak with command? Because we are terrified of the feedback. If you command your life to change and it does not immediately manifest, you must face the truth that your command lacked the necessary weight of faith. We prefer the mystery of maybe to the clarity of not yet. The recursive question here is, how do you command without desperation? Desperation is a form of asking. True command is calm, certain, and quiet. It is the tone of a master who knows the law and knows that the law cannot fail. The law of command requires the total dissolution of the negotiator within you. You must stop trying to trade your efforts for your rewards. You must stop trying to prove your worthiness to the universe. You are worthy by birthright. Your voice is the lever, and your belief is the fulcrum. When you speak a command, you are not forcing the world to do something it doesn't want to do. You are calling forth the inherent potential that is already there, waiting to be shaped by your focus. To command is to act as the sovereign of your own reality, holding the gaze of the infinite without blinking. In the annals of the ancient world, there was a Roman centurion who stood before a teacher of the law. His servant was dying, a matter of grave and desperate urgency. His friends urged him to beg the master to come to his house and perform a miracle. The centurion, a man accustomed to the exercise of authority, stopped them. He understood something the others did not. He walked to the teacher and said, "I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes. I tell another, 'Come,' and he comes. I tell my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it. He then looked at the teacher and uttered the words that would echo through the centuries. "But speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed." The centurion did not ask for a journey, a touch, or a ritual. He understood the law of command. He recognized that there was a hierarchy of power, and that at the highest level, the word is sufficient. He knew that the substance of the world, even the substance of health and sickness, must bow to the frequency of an unwavering decree. He did not treat his desire as a negotiation. He treated it as an order issued from the station of his authority. He didn't need to see the change to believe it. He commanded the change, and the change occurred because he spoke from the center of his sovereignty. The lesson for the modern seeker is profound. How many times have you begged for a change that was waiting for you to simply name it? The world is not waiting to be persuaded, it is waiting to be directed. To embody the law of command today, you must perform the shift of the spine. In your next moment of decision, stop the mental chatter that weighs the pros and cons. Stand tall, take a deep breath, and issue your command. Do not say, "I hope this happens." Say, "I now command the resources required for this project to appear." Do not say, "Please help me find clarity." Say, "I now decree that clarity is my baseline, and the path is revealed." Feel the difference in your body. Asking feels like shrinking. Commanding feels like expanding. When you speak, feel the vibration of the words in your bones. Do not look for the result with the eyes of a skeptic. Look for it with the eyes of an owner. You have issued the order. The universe is now moving to comply. You have taken the command. You are beginning to understand that the world moves when you speak with authority. But there is a final, crowning principle, the law of identity. You are not just a person who speaks. You are the being who defines the reality. Your commands are powerful because of who is speaking them. In our next chapter, we will strip away the last mask of the ego and stand in the light of the I Am. Are you ready to see who you truly are? Imagine a vast ornate ballroom, its ceiling painted with constellations that seem to shift as one walks beneath them. Hundreds of guests are gathered here, kings in velvet, merchants in coarse wool, poets in rags, all dancing with frantic intensity. Each guest is performing, posturing, and straining to catch the eye of an unseen master, hoping for a nod, a sign, a promotion. They are all convinced that their worth is determined by the complexity of their dance, the grace of their bow, or the weight of the jewelry they wear. They are sweating, breathing heavily, their eyes darting to and fro, trapped in the exhausting labor of becoming someone worthy of the room. But standing in the center of this chaos, largely unnoticed, is a figure who is not dancing at all. This person is not dressed in rags or velvet, but in a simple, timeless garment that seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it. They are not performing. They are not asking. They are simply present. When the music swells, they do not rush to match the tempo. When it falls into silence, they do not tremble. The paradox is this: the dancers are convinced that the silent one is failing, that they are not part of the game. Yet, the music itself seems to emanate from the silent one's stillness. The truth of the ballroom, the secret that turns the stomach of every performer, is that the silent one is not a guest at all. They are the host. And until the dancers realize that they are not there to earn a place, but to recognize their own authority, they will continue to dance until their feet bleed, serving a master that only exists because they have forgotten their own name. The law of identity is the most profound and most resisted truth in the spiritual sciences. We must ask, why do we spend our lives trying to attain wealth, success, and fulfillment? We do so because we believe we are separate from those things. We believe we are seekers, which inherently implies that the thing we seek is elsewhere, and we are not yet that thing. This is the root of the performance trap. We think, if I do enough, I will have enough. and then I will be enough. How do we break the recursion of this trap? We must realize that the subconscious mind does not respond to your performances. It responds to your identity. It does not care that you spent 10 hours working. It cares about the definition of self you carried while you worked. If you carry the identity of a striver, you will continue to manifest a reality that requires struggle. If you carry the identity of a master, you will manifest a reality of command. The subconscious is a loyal mirror, reflecting not your desires, but your conviction of being. Why is this so difficult to internalize? Because we are haunted by history bias. We look at our past and see a person who has failed, who has lost, and who has lacked. Our subconscious says, "You are the person who experienced those things." To shift identity is to reject the evidence of your own life. It is the ultimate act of intellectual and spiritual rebellion. How does one achieve this shift? Through the I am principle. The I am is the foundational code of your reality. Whatever you attach to I am, you become. If you say, "I am broke," you have issued a decree of identity that the subconscious must defend at all costs. If you say, "I am the wealth of the divine made visible," you are not just using a metaphor, you are activating a frequency that forces the world to conform to your new self-image. You are not becoming wealthy. You are remembering that wealth is your nature. The recursive depth is this. Your outer world is not a measure of your work. It is a measure of your name. Change the name, and you change the destiny. In the kingdom of Ethelgard, there was a legend of a prince who had been kidnapped as an infant and raised in a remote, poverty-stricken village. He spent his youth herding goats, living on meager scraps of bread, and carrying the shame of a laborer who had nothing to his name. He was beaten by the village elders, mocked by his peers, and taught that he was the lowest of the low. His name, in the village, was Dusty, for he was always covered in the dirt of the fields. For 20 years, the prince lived as a beggar, believing that his reality, the hunger, the cold, the mockery, was his entire identity. He walked with a slumped shoulder, his eyes always cast downward, fearing the gaze of anyone who might hold power over him. One day, the royal guard rode into the village, their armor gleaming like the sun. They had searched every corner of the realm for the lost heir. When they saw the boy with the goat, they did not see the dirt, they saw the features of the king. They dismounted, fell to their knees in the mud, and called him by his true name. They placed a heavy, velvet cloak around his shoulders and a signet ring upon his finger. The prince looked at his hands, trembling. He looked at the guards, then at the villagers who were suddenly bowing in terror. In that moment, he had a choice. He could stay the boy who herded goats, or he could accept that the goat herder had been a grand, elaborate hallucination. He stood up. He straightened his shoulders. He did not look at the goats. He looked at the horizon. He realized he had never been poor. He had simply been wearing the clothes of a servant while living in a kingdom that was already his. He did not have to get the throne. He only had to remember that he was the prince. The moment he accepted the identity, the villagers' abuse became irrelevant, and the hunger became a memory of a shadow. To embody the law of identity, you must perform the naming ritual. Take a quiet moment and ask yourself, who am I when I remove all my titles, all my past failures, and all my societal labels? Strip away the employee, the parent, the debtor, and the striver. What remains is the I am. Now, clothe this I am in the truth of your divine nature. When you wake up, before you check the world, declare your identity. I am the wealth of the infinite, expressed in time and space. Do not speak it as a hope. Speak it as a name. Wear this identity like the royal cloak. When an obstacle appears, do not ask, "How can I solve this?" Ask, "How does the person I am handle this?" You will find that the prince does not struggle with the goat herder's problems. He solves them with a word. You have reclaimed the name. You are no longer the one who is striving. You are the one who is revealing. But there is a final, vital understanding: the anatomy of overflow. You have cleared the space, you have planted the seed, you have wielded the wand, and you have claimed the name. Now, we must understand how to live in the state of constant, rhythmic abundance. How does the soul move when it knows it is the source? In our next chapter, we will explore the circulation of wealth, the final seal on your transformation. You are not a container that holds, you are a river that flows. Are you ready to see how the infinite moves through you? There is a terrifying beauty in the way a mountain stream behaves. It does not hoard the water. It does not build dams of ego to trap the current in a stagnant pool, fearful that if it lets the water pass, it will go dry. If the stream were to try to save its water, it would immediately cease to be a stream and become a swamp, a dark, foul, and motionless trap. The life of the stream exists entirely in the flow, in the constant, rhythmic exchange of energy. It receives from the heights and gives to the valley, and in that movement, it remains crystal clear, cold, and eternal. Consider the human paradox. We are designed to be conduits of infinite supply, yet we treat our lives as if they were walled fortresses. We clench our fists around our resources, our time, and our energy, operating under the frantic, low-frequency delusion that there is only so much to go around. We look at our bank accounts with the eyes of a miser, watching the numbers as if they were our own heartbeat. We fear that if we give, if we spend, if we circulate, we will be left with nothing. But observe the contradiction. The more we attempt to hold on to the form, the more the essence escapes us. The spirit of abundance, it dies the moment it is caged by fear. We have mistaken having for being, and in doing so, we have turned the vibrant river of our lives into the stagnant, bitter water of a locked vault. The truth, which the world is too loud to hear, is that wealth is not a hoard to be protected. It is a breath to be exhaled so that it may be inhaled again. To grasp the anatomy of overflow, we must conduct a rigorous audit of our relationship with substance. Why do we feel the desperate, clawing need to hoard? It stems from the primal fear of the finite self. We have convinced ourselves that we are biological machines, fighting for survival in a hostile, competitive universe. The recursive question is, how does this fear dictate our reality? It creates a constrictive vibration. When you vibrate with the fear of loss, you are broadcasting a signal that says, I am empty, and I cannot be replenished. The subconscious, that faithful servant, receives this signal and dutifully restricts the flow of opportunity, money, and favor to match your belief in your own limitation. The law of overflow is not about math. It is about physics. We must ask, why does the circulation of wealth beget more wealth? Because abundance is an energy that requires a channel. If you become a wide, unobstructed channel, the universe rushes to fill you, for it abhors a vacuum. When you spend or give from a place of sovereign stewardship, knowing that you are not the owner of the wealth, but the manager of the flow, you remove the friction of fear. How do we break the loop of hoarding? Through conscious circulation. Most people spend money with resentment, mourning the loss of the coin as it leaves their hand. This is a profound miscalculation. Every dollar you release is a seed you have planted into the marketplace of your reality. If you release it with the frequency of lack, you are planting weeds. If you release it with the frequency of expansion, you are planting the harvest of your next fortune. Recursive thinking reveals a deeper truth. Why do we fear the outflow? Because we do not trust our own voice to command the inflow. We fear that if we let go, we will have to go out and work to get more. But when you operate from the identity of the I am, you know that you don't work to get, you speak to reveal. The money is not coming from your boss or the market. It is coming from the infinite substance, and your voice is the gate. Therefore, you can afford to be generous. You can afford to spend, and you can afford to flow, because you know the gate is open. The anatomy of overflow is simply this. The more you allow to move through you, the larger the vessel you become. In the village of Oak Haven, there stood an ancient stone well that was said to never run dry. The villagers came to it with buckets, drawing water for their crops and their homes. Most of them, however, were plagued by a lingering anxiety. They would take only half a bucket, fearing that if they took more, they would drain the well. They kept their buckets in their homes, half full, and guarded them with jealous eyes. Because they were so afraid of running out, they never truly watered their fields, they only dampened the dust. Their village was a place of gray, dusty silence, even though they lived on the edge of an infinite source. Then came a traveler who observed their misery. She walked to the well, took a large bucket, and poured the entire contents onto the parched ground of the plaza. The villagers screamed in protest. "What are you doing? You're wasting it. The well will run dry." The traveler laughed. She drew another bucket, and another, drenching the plaza until the dust turned to mud and the mud turned to grass. She took the water and shared it with every animal, every thirsty traveler, and every dry tree in the village. The villagers watched in horror, waiting for the well to go silent. But with every bucket she drew, the water level rose higher. The more she took, the faster the water bubbled up from the deep, hidden springs beneath the earth. The well was not a container, it was a connection. By drawing freely, the traveler had cleared the path for the hidden spring to rush upward. She taught the villagers that the well was not a resource to be guarded, but a presence to be served. They had been trying to own the water, and in doing so, they had blocked the very source that provided it. Once they began to draw with abandon, the village transformed into a garden. They realized that their lack had been a self-imposed prison, and that the infinite was only waiting for them to open the bucket. To embody the law of overflow today, you must perform the ritual of the conscious spend. The next time you pay a bill or purchase a necessity, do not do it with a heavy heart. Do it with the ritual of blessing. As the money leaves your hand, say silently, "I release this to circulate and return to me multiplied. I am a steward of divine abundance, and the supply is infinite." Feel the sensation of openness in your chest. Breathe deeply. You are not losing, you are directing the flow. Practice generous awareness. In your interactions, offer your time, your wisdom, and your kindness without counting the cost. You are an overflowing vessel. When you give, you are not subtracting from your total. You are proving your abundance to your own subconscious. You are demonstrating that you are not afraid, and therefore, you are not blocked. If you are ready to stop hoarding your life and start living as a river of infinite supply, hit the like button. Subscribe to the journey, for we are moving toward the final seal. You have learned to move. You have learned to circulate. You have learned that your worth is not a measure of what you hold, but a measure of what you allow. You have stripped away the fear of the void, the bankruptcy of belief, the static of the past, the mirage of time, and the slavery of the ego. You are standing now at the edge of the final precipice. In our next and final chapter, we will distill everything into the unbroken decree, the singular master frequency that, once activated, seals your reality in the matrix of the divine. The old story is finished, the pen is in your hand, and the ink is your own voice. Are you ready to speak it into the eternal? The journey arrives at the summit. Silence, absolute and crystalline, reigns here. Below, in the valley, the world continues its frantic, oscillating dance of shadow and light, the rise and fall of fortunes, the noise of survival, the desperate, clawing grip of those who still believe they must earn their right to exist. But here, on this height, the air is thin, pure, and electric with the static of potentiality. Look back at the path you have traversed, the void you entered, the soil you tilled, the wand you reclaimed, the bankruptcy you renounced, the knots you severed, the clock you dismantled, the command you issued, the identity you donned, and the river you unleashed. It is a long, arduous ascent, yet the descent into the realization of truth is but a single step. The paradox of the final threshold is this: you have spent an eternity climbing toward a truth that was waiting in the very first breath you took. You were never broken, never poor, and never separated from the infinite. You were merely an author who had forgotten he was holding the pen, lost in a story he had accidentally written while sleeping. The world, that grand, shifting landscape of circumstances, is not a wall, but a canvas. It has been waiting, with a terrifying, holy patience, for you to stop narrating your lack and start announcing your nature. The final observation is not a sight to be seen, it is a weight to be felt. The universe is not a place you inhabit, it is a frequency you are. And now, you must fix that frequency, seal it with the unbreakable decree, and step down into the world not as a seeker, but as the source. To finalize the transformation, we must subject the very idea of completion to a recursive audit. Why does the human soul seek a final truth? We do so because we are trapped in the linear illusion of a beginning, middle, and end. We must ask, how can one become that which they already are? The answer lies in the realization that you are not becoming anything. You are remembering the divinity that was suppressed by the hypnosis of the material. How does the unbroken decree function as a seal? The decree is the synthesis of all previous laws. It is the command, the identity, and the overflow fused into a singular, unwavering vibration. Recursive thinking compels us to recognize that the law is not a tool you use, it is the law you obey. When you make a decree, you are not manipulating the external world, you are aligning your internal vibration with the divine order. The universe does not comply with your demands, it recognizes itself in your declaration. Why do we fail to sustain the decree? We fail because we attempt to hold the state with our ego rather than our spirit. We try to force the manifestation with our mental effort, which is an admission of doubt. The recursive key is this: how does one sustain the decree without effort? By shifting from the tense of pursuit to the tense of presence. If you are trying to make it happen, you are in the future. If you are commanding it to be, you are in the eternal now. The decree must become your gospel, a constant, rhythmic repetition that rewires the nervous system. It is a psychological imperative to understand that your subconscious will challenge the decree. It will present the evidence of the senses to prove you wrong. This is not a failure. It is a test of your sovereign authority. The decree is unbroken because it is independent of the echo. You speak the truth. The truth creates the reality, and the reality creates the echo. If the echo is discordant, you do not change your voice, you deepen your conviction. The decree is the end of the argument. It is the moment the architect stops drafting and starts building. There is no more searching, no more bargaining, no more hoping. There is only the I am, and the world, in all its material majesty, is merely the shadow cast by that singular, infinite flame. In the great city of stone, there was a sculptor named Valerius, who was commissioned by the High Council to carve a statue of the absolute truth. He worked in the public square, surrounded by the chatter of the city. He spent years chiseling away at a colossal block of white marble, and for years all the people saw was a shapeless, jagged, and confusing hunk of rock. The critics whispered that he was a charlatan, that the marble was flawed, and that he had wasted the council's gold. Valerius did not answer them. He did not defend his work. He did not show them his sketches. He simply kept his eyes fixed on the marble, seeing not the jagged edges, but the form that was already there. He spoke to the stone, not in words of human language, but in the language of his craft, the rhythmic, unwavering strike of the mallet and the chisel. He was not making the statue. He was removing the illusion that hid it. One afternoon, in the peak of the golden hour, Valerius struck the final blow. He stepped back, his hands covered in the white dust of his labor. The people surged forward, expecting to see a miracle. And there it stood, a figure of such transcendent majesty that the entire city fell silent. The critics dropped their stones, the merchants stopped their haggling, and even the birds seemed to hush. The council asked him, "Valerius, how did you know how to carve such perfection from such a rough and hopeless block?" Valerius pointed to the discarded chips of stone littering the square. "The statue was always here," he replied. "I did not create it. I only cleared away what was not it. My secret was not the chisel, but the refusal to accept the lie of the rough stone. I held the image of the truth until the stone had no choice but to surrender its mask." He had lived the unbroken decree. He had held the truth until the world was forced to catch up to his vision. To embody the unbroken decree, you must commit to your final, sovereign declaration. Take this sentence and let it become the heartbeat of your existence. I am the wealth of God made visible. I speak, and it is. Say it in the morning light. Say it in the silence of the night. Say it when the world contradicts you, and say it until your very atmosphere hums with the frequency of your certainty. This is your wand. This is your vault. This is your name. You are not starting a new life. You are revealing the life that has been waiting for you to recognize it. Walk now into your day with the quiet, devastating power of one who knows the truth. You are the speaker. You are the architect. You are the author. The ink is dry, and the page is yours. The mandate is complete. You stand at the threshold of a world that is ready to be shaped by your voice. The static is gone, the mirror is clean, and the command has been issued into the halls of the infinite. Your life is no longer a collection of circumstances. It is an expression of your essence. But know this, the master who has reached the summit does not stop moving. The creation is an eternal, expanding masterpiece. As you step forward, carry the weight of this truth like a crown. The world is waiting for your next decree. Go now and speak your world into being.